Greetings. Now that we have a mage in the party and we are about to face our first actual combat with a mage in the party, I figured let's talk a little bit about how magic works in Runebearer and in Bostonia, and then actually give you a couple, and then talk about the fight in this fight in particular. So what I'm looking at here is the Blizzard, which is Ren's rune. And this is old text, literally. I did change stats and so on to keep up to date. So Ren got her rune because she was with an expedition that was far in the mountains, north of Bostonia, in Baraki lands. And she got separated from her group and got caught in a snowstorm and was near freezing to death. And so this rune, the Blizzard, is given by a spirit who is trapped in a tomb. Typically, the Baraki who go after this rune would bring an offering of some type to the spirit, like a bear or a stag. And, you know, you would trap it in some way or defeat it in some way. This worked, or bargain with it in some way to get it to give you the Blizzard. In this case, Ren was weakened, and the spirit sort of contacted her and led her to the tomb as she was, you know, succumbing to hypothermia. She found her way into the tomb, hoping to get shelter from the wind and the snow, and instead, the being made her a deal and told her that, hey, I can save you, but you have to agree to free me, or try to free me. And thus she got the rune. The rune allows her to ignore the effects of normal cold, and that lets her walk through the snowstorm. So I do need to, so there you go. That's how she got the rune. And some runes are like that. Some runes you do not collect, they collect you. The third eye is another one that largely traps its victims, surprises them, and puts the third eye into their foreheads. In this case, the Blizzard, the spirit who gives the Blizzard, coerced her effectively into taking it. So it comes with a lot of advantages and disadvantages. You can see them here. I didn't do cold resistance. I'll put immune to normal cold. Right, so she takes less damage from cold. She has a plus to saves against cold, minus against fire. She is compelled to try to help the spirit when there's an opportunity that presents itself. So, for instance, she goes past a library. She has to effectively check whether there's any notes in there or anything in there that will help her free the spirit. She, of course, doesn't want to. She probably knows in her heart of hearts that the thing is evil. And in fact, that's one of the reasons she is going to try to get other elemental runes, is to counteract the influence that this ice rune has over her. And that will become apparent in the story as we go forward. But I do find, that's one thing I sort of find interesting, right? The runes are partly backstory too. They're partly plot devices a little bit. If you play it that way, you don't have to. I mean, Runebearer mages are, I think, arguably weaker in combat than their counterparts in, say, D&D, for instance, especially high-level wizards. I don't think any Runebearer mage ever gets to the level of a high-level wizard does in, say, a D&D game. And by high, I mean teens. I mean 11 through, obviously, 20. But I would say that we cap out around the equivalent of maybe a 9th level character in terms of that kind of thing, or maybe, right, maybe 11th in some cases. It just depends. Some runes are more combat heavy than others. The Blizzard is a pretty combat-y rune, and so she should be powerful as she gets up into 2nd through 4th circle. The Blizzard itself, spell-wise, her first circle spells, it ended up, and I changed it quite a bit from the old version, the last version. It ends up being a quite the weird melee hybrid. Instead of, say, like a touch spell, or instead of a, I mean, she does have a range spell, ice shards, which is equivalent probably to the sparks in lightning, hand of lightning, or the low grade fire bolts, etc. It does 2d6, which isn't great, but it does do damage to things which normally can't take damage. Like, it ignores all the undead still take damage from this ice, like that kind of thing, right? As opposed to, like, a lot of skeletons and stuff are very hard for low-level parties to kill because they're only bones, and so all their slashing weapons and so on don't do as much damage, whereas magic tends to do that damage. So mages tend to be outright weaker against just plain old mundane foes than just a good, sturdy fighter. And then they tend to be stronger against wacky foes because the fighters are having problems. So, for instance, an elemental. If they met an elemental here, like a true honest-to-God elemental in the wizard's tower, he'd probably take half damage from all of their mundane attacks and have a boatload of hit points, which would mean that Rorik and Tiny, who normally are doing all the damage, would now be sort of rendered, crappy. And it would largely be maybe the alchemy, and certainly Ren would be doing the damage. So Ren, I thought these were interesting. Ice Shield and Ice Spike, that sort of makes her a weird melee hybrid. So she can, with a half action, draw a shield of ice. That shield is literally the best shield in the game. You cannot get a shield that has a +3. Like the biggest shields have a +2 in a Runebearer, or the best shields, unless it's magic, of course. But we're not talking about magic. Her shield has a block bonus of +3, and so she actually took the shield skill to make use of that fact. And so her shield skill is 11. And so when she pulls out this magical shield, her shield block goes to 14, which makes her the best defensive character that the party has. She is literally the best tank the group has when she is kitted out with her magical ice shield. So I thought that was interesting. And so I sort of, I leaned into that a little bit. And instead of getting like a touch spell, like a lot of low-level combat runes get, she gets a spear. So she literally makes a spear. The spear has Pierce 3 and can chill. And again, chill is a great debuff. It's a -2 damage to anything that it affects. And so again, I thought that was a really nice... She becomes a de facto tank when she is kitted out. Now, the problem with this comes down to casting times. So in Runebearer, we do not specify specific casting times as a second, 2 seconds, or 10 seconds, or whatever. Instead, you will see W for word, C for combat, and then VS, S, or L, or VL. So very short, short, long, very long. Let's go from high to low. Very long means the spell takes a very long time. I mean, duh. It takes a very long time. It takes longer than you want to think about in terms of, so days. So lots of preparation. You might have to draw some magic circles, right? You might have to sit vigil for 3 nights or something like that. It's very long. And that usually actually warrants a description somewhere saying, this takes 3 days to cast. Long is on the order of an hour. Or it's on the order of tens of minutes to 2 hours, right? So it is long. You're not casting this under any time pressure whatsoever. You are, it is meant to be cast. It's a ritual. You need to prepare a space for it, kind of thing. It's not necessarily a ritual, but it might take 10 minutes of chanting. Those are easily disruptible spells, right? It might take, so you want to be alone or in a safe space when you cast a long spell. Very long, even more so. Short is on the order of minutes, but I mean a couple minutes. So you're not casting it under hard time pressure. You might cast it, but the enemy is attacking the gate. Well, okay, you might have 5 minutes for them to attack the gate. You can cast a short spell. Very short is on the order of seconds. It just means it cannot be cast in combat. It can be cast on combat scale times, but that the hustle and bustle of combat at all is too much stress to deal with. Like, you could cast it in the length of a combat. Easily, you could cast a very short spell. Or you could cast a very short spell as someone was trying to open a door that you were holding shut. Or in the time it took to pick a lock. Or very short is, don't worry about the casting time, it's really short. You just cannot be in rounds. You cannot be fighting. Because if there is that kind of disruption around you, it is not castable. And that dividing line, those very short spells versus combat spells, that's a dividing line. And that's one of the ways that we sort of balance the game. Like, one goal of Runebearer's combat system and spell system is that fighters are always relevant in combat. There might be situations where a magic user is way more relevant. Some runes get AoEs, and well, that means in a certain situation they are indeed good. But that fighters should always be relevant. And one way we make sure that fighters are always relevant is that certain spells simply can't be cast in combat without whatever talents, whatever. Sometimes I have let mages get talents and trade those, like trade a talent in and go, can I cast this one single spell that is very short in combat? And as a GM, you can say yes or no. And that's one of the ways that wizards can progress and become awesome, is, that kind of ad hoc adjustment to their, not ad hoc, but collaborative. Oh, that would be cool. Go ahead. That'll be your signature thing that you can do that no one else can do. That kind of thing. As a rule, very short means not combat. So you'll see Chill here. She, with a few words and a hand gesture, can drop the temperature by 30 degrees around her. But in a 10 hex radius, in a range 30 hexes. So around her typically. And that's very short. So she can cast that on the order of, say, 10 seconds, 5 seconds, right? It doesn't take her much time at all. But in combat, she cannot do this. Now that leaves us... Resist cold is like, say it takes, 40, 50 seconds or a minute, right? It can be easily cast within the span of a scene. She could cast it several times before the party leaves shelter, and we don't have to keep track of time and go, well, hold on, is that going to take you 5 hours? No, it's all within a scene, done. So let's talk about the combat spells. There are two main types of combat spells you're going to see. You're going to see words. Words were added in Runebearer, this edition of Runebearer. The idea is that a word is literally, it takes a word and perhaps a simple hand gesture, a single hand gesture. Now, you still, technically, I believe, I'd have to go actually read the rules. I had to read my own rules occasionally. No time, a single word to invoke. Word spells take half actions, and the caster takes no penalties for being in the fray. I do believe that I don't believe there is a. We should look. Casting a spell. We'd have to see. Maybe we need to write that. Maybe we need to write. Typically, you need a single hand free. Maybe we should put that in each of these casting times. Those are casting conditions, and make those absolutely clear. So I don't know. I actually don't. Strangely enough, I don't know whether you need a hand to cast a word spell or not. I'm going to say no for now, right? It's a word. And so it's a word of power. So you speak, and that is enough to invoke it. And that makes those the ideal combat spells, sort of, right? She could be carrying a spear in one hand, a shield in the other, and still invoke a word. Technically, we should get rid of resist cold. Oh, it's touch. That's why. That's why it's there, right? She doesn't need it. She can just touch someone else and imbue upon them her cold resistance. Anyway, back to words. Now, word is an attack action. It does end your turn. So you could make a half move in word, but you cannot word and make a half action. I want to put some restrictions on it. So, I don't know that that's necessary. I do know, but that's the rule for now. Words are attack actions. They end your turn. So she could do Ice Shield and Ice Spike. That's the one difficulty she has in getting that full kit out, is that it takes her effectively 2 rounds to do it. And that is problematic when she is not ready for the fight. If she has a moment to prepare ahead of time, if she knows a fight is coming, then casting that is great. But 2 rounds to get your kit out is actually very, very difficult to manage. Combat spells are cast via something we affectionately call the drum roll. And I do think there are certainly ways around this, but I think we're keeping this. This is how it worked throughout all versions of Runebearer previous, and I think we're going to keep it for now. What that means is, on the round that on round 1, if you say, I want to cast shards, you actually say, I'm going to start casting. And that is your whole first round, is simply casting. What that allows is it allows people to come up and hit you and try to ruin your spell. You have a whole round. The spell will go off on your initiative in round 2. And so all of round 1, you are sitting there doing the cast. So it's 3 to 5 seconds like any normal combat round. And you are simply chanting and weaving and doing the magician's thing, right? Whatever that is. I don't know how they did that, by the way. I mean, I would have had to have practiced for like weeks to get all those hand motions in. So they do that for the 5 seconds. On round 2, you get to release the spell on your action. It is a free action to release a spell and make your attack. So on round 2, the first thing you do is throw shards at someone, or you can hold it. That's a different topic, but you can throw the shards, and that is a 0 phase, a free action. Then you get your whole full action on round 2, which you could start to drum roll again so that you can release on round 3. So mages are almost always 1 round behind the combat. If they are a traditional casting mage, round 1 will be I start to cast. Round 2 will be release, start to cast again. Round 3 is release, start to cast again for round 4, and so on and so forth. Note that moving and any other thing which ruins that rhythm puts the mage another round behind. So if on round 1 I cast, on round 2 I release, and then move, that takes my action for round 2. And on round 3, my action will be I start to cast again. And so to disrupt mages, you have to get them to move. And to keep your mages casting, you need to make sure that they're not being attacked and not moving, not having to move in combat. And so there is a very much a tactical imperative. If magic's important to the combat, there's a tactical imperative to put a front line in front of your traditional casting mages. Now, one neat thing that you can sort of do is I could cast on round 1, release on round 2, take a half move, and then cast a word. So almost getting 2 spells in that round 2. But then on round 3, right, and so on. So you see how that sort of works. And you have to sort of keep track of, you know, as a mage, keep track of where you are in the battlefield, when it's going to be safe to cast, and when it's going to be advantageous to cast, because, you know, if I cast on round 1, I will not get to release until round 2, and a lot could have happened there. And those are combat spells. When you cast, you make a skill test. DL of first circle spells are 10. Ren has a 12. She is 2 up, as we like to call it. And that's great. She is... Excuse me. She is 2 up. And so we'll make a skill test. And she rolls an 8, so she succeeds by 10. That's great. What that means is she would be able to cast her spell, and she would suffer no penalty. If she only succeeds, let's say she only succeeded by... There you go. She only succeeds by 1. Well, you need to succeed by 3 or more to cast without penalty. If you succeed by only 1 in this case, you will suffer a penalty to future spell casting until you rest. So in this case, because she succeeded but did not succeed by 3, her spell casting goes to 11. It drops by 1. So she would be 11 of 12 until she rested. If she fails, she can lose from 1 to 3 levels. So there's no mana in Runebearer. There's no spell slots in Runebearer. What there is your skill degrades over time, making spells harder to cast as you go on. Now, this can suck. It can be very random. It can be, and we'll talk about that in a minute, it can be very random. Mages have to sort of know when the time is right to cast the big stuff and when the time is right to cast the little stuff. Now, Ren only has little stuff, and it's still non-trivial for her to cast. So she has to probably burn inspiration sometimes and so on, right? There are perks that you can pick up and talents you can pick up over time. And that's sort of how that, I mean, that's how that goes, right? I mean, you could, now, she also has the option when she loses a level, when she loses 1 or more levels, she can opt to instead take hit point damage. So let's say she succeeds by 1, she's going to take an 11 of 12. She can say, I don't want to do that. Instead, I want 3 points to immediately go to injury. Right? So she can 3 points right there. So she takes 3 hit points. If she loses 3 levels by a failure, she can go, you know what? I'm taking 9 hit points. So mages can burn their life force instead of burning their spell levels. And a lot of them choose to do so because obviously you want to keep casting until you can. But you cannot heal that damage. That damage has to come back day at a time. It goes straight to the end. It goes, you can't shake it off. The medical guy can't bandage you. The alchemist can't. It goes immediately to, yeah, that's 9 days of healing. So again, that's an option, and you typically will take that option in most cases, but you also have to be careful. Now, Ren has leaned into this idea that she is going to be able to get this ice spear out the door and probably the ice shield. So she did not take weapon spear. Instead, she took weapon magic and is going to use that with her spear. Now, that's a problem because if she does not get the spear out, she now has no weapon, really, to use. She can bash with the shield. That's sort of shitty. And she does carry a shield. So typically, she will try to pull the shield out and then cast the spear, probably, because that's the optimal condition. Even though the shield is really good, and she should, and when she can get the shield out, because that would make her like the best, like I said, best tank in the party. Probably the most optimal thing she would do. She doesn't really carry a spear because she can't actually use one. She can only use her magical spear. What she ought to do probably is on round 1 of any combat, if she does not already have these out, is pull the shield off her back for a half action, word the spear, now she's ready to fight. And she is a good combatant when she does those things and when she can get that off. And then she's a good melee combatant, weirdly. So let's talk about the fight specifically. So this is the opening setup. Here's the bedroom, and first off, I typically make combat maps a little larger than they really are, because I do want to give people room to move. That's just, I don't know, that's just a thing. I like more space in a battle than less space. I think my players do too. I want to be able to move around, and this is a very large bedroom, so keep that in mind. The bedroom would probably almost half this size in real scale. And that's okay. I mean, that's just, like I said, that is a what do you want to say? That is a personal preference of me and my group. You may certainly decide to play otherwise. And it just depends on what the fight's going to look like. And how many characters there are. Like, I literally have a table with 8 people at it, and you might have a dozen enemies. I have 20 dudes on the board. You jam them all up, that is the most boring fight ever. So we need to open up the space a little bit to give people space to move around, and to make Runebearer interesting, you really do need a little bit of movement, at least before everyone gets gummed up and engaged. So this is a big bedroom, is my point. So full disclosure, and the reason I wanted to talk about this fight today is I actually ran this offline last night. And my party got its butt kicked. Like, they absolutely did not do well at all. In fact, I TPK'd, so I went 6 rounds, and by that time, Martin was the only one left, and he was outside of the room, and everybody else was bleeding out on the floor here. So why? Why is that? What are these? What are these freaking things? They only have 16 hit points, man. Like, what are we talking about? So what they have is, you can see here, so they're low-level electrical elements. This is animated armor. Low-level elementals bound to suits of armor. Their attack is... So, and again, I have toned these down a little bit, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So I had attack 11, defense 9, and 7. They do 1d6. I had 1d8 here as a weapon, which I'll probably down that to 1d6. Maybe. I'll have to think about that. Armor is 4 across the board and 16 hit points, but they cannot be wounded because they are inanimate. And that is the key, I think, to this. So the main key, and a lot of the reason I think why the group has done pretty well in the past, is that they could wound most enemies and start to work the combat in their favor quickly. So a lot of the thugs that we fought and the press gangers with no armor, that was their main weakness, is not wearing armor. These guys, Tiny and Rorik, could do some damage and typically take a guy out reasonably quickly. Here, you've got to grind these elementals down. They are not taking damage. They don't feel pain. You are physically knocking pieces of armor off of them to dissipate the electrical life force within. So literally smacking it when, and they have 4 armor to represent the fact that you are essentially just hitting metal plates and chain shirts and so on, and trying to essentially dislodge them from whatever is holding them in place. I sort of imagine these things to be like a heart of electrical energy that is almost magnetically or electrostatically holding all this metal together, and moving it around. And that literally you are smashing this thing down until like the helmet comes off or the arm comes off, and then trying to dissipate that energy within by doing that enough times. And that takes 16 hit points of damage. And it was 20 originally. So what I've done with these is I'm thinking, so if this is the original stat block that I started with, I am probably going to mark the stat block down probably like this, D6 plus D6. So a little bit less damage, a little bit less attack skill, and a little bit less hit points to grind through. And that's probably where I end up on these things. Now that, is that the one I just did? I actually don't know which one I just changed, because I like that format a little better too. Like that's easier to read. So I'm going to copy that and paste it in everybody, damn it. So while I do that, so here's the question, and this is sort of the interesting question, and that is, well, is that okay? Right? I've watched a lot of these guys do solo role plays, and I watch a lot of them do, I watch a lot of these guys do solo role plays, and a lot of them have that sort of OSR old school vibe. I'm playing the 3 brown books OD&D, and my dwarf has 2 hit points because I rolled it, and we don't do maximum hit points because that's for wimpy Gen Zs. Right, that kind of game. And we go through a random dungeon, and we met 10 orcs, and and someone died, and that's fine, and that they do it. They roll up a new guy and they move on. And so the question is it okay for me to have tested this combat and then said, you know what, I think those creatures, 5 of them for this group, are overtuned, or should I just have said, yeah, I rolled 5? Like 4 creatures or 3 creatures might not be too much, but 5 of these are too much. And I'm back and forth on this. On one hand, I don't want to, so I also see a lot of those guys. So here's the other funny part. I also then see a lot of those guys then make weird on the fly rulings that make things easier for them. Right? You can say, well, we're all about characters dying and death is, life is cheap in the OSR and all those wacky things. And OD&D was for men with hair on their chests and all that stuff. And I actually agree with that. OD&D was for men with hair on their chests. Gray hair, probably. And I think that's fine. But I don't like to make those on the fly rulings that make the fights arbitrarily easier, because so I was watching one dude, and now I'm into just mental, like, you know, I'm off on my own tangent here. I watched one guy, and he was like, oh, there's some kobolds, and the kobolds were slinging them and causing damage. And so he he let his guys sort of roll up, you know, chain whatever initiative, and then they roll up the stairs, form a shield wall, impenetrable at the top of the stairs, and then fought the kobolds. But the kobolds had no chance to hit them now because he ruled that the shield wall was impenetrable. How are the kobolds ever going to hit me when I'm behind all these shields? And I can pop up and throw a javelin and so on. And I'm like, well, but that's, your shield is accounted for in your armor class. It reduces it by 1. You already have that ability. You already have it. And so arbitrarily saying, well, if I do this one thing, I'm now unbeatable, smells to me just as bad as, like, it smells worse to me than going, I don't like how this combat ends up being balanced. Let me tweak it down a tiny bit to see how it then plays out. And keep in mind, these monsters, I am making them as I go. Like this bestiary here is, I mean, I am literally constructing it as we speak, right? And indeed, they don't have the, no, I did do 16 done, right? And I'm going to say hitting animated armor. And this guy will get shock skin plus. So it sort of got me thinking, well, what kind of game do you want? How much death in this game is appropriate? So when characters reach 0, and I do this different ways in different games because I'm sort of trying out death mechanics. In this game, when you reach 0, you can go to negative your wound threshold. So for instance, Rorik with 40 hit points can go to -10, a quarter. Negative a quarter of his hit points. So he can go to -10. Once he's knocked to 0, he immediately gets the bleed status. Which means he's going to lose a hit point a round and have to roll to see if he won't lose more hit points next round. And bleeds are brutal, can be brutal. And if someone has to get to him, stop his bleed, to then be able to revive him. And then he will be at that negative hit point total until he can be healed to positive. And once he's healed to positive, he is then eligible to get up and start fighting again. But until then, he is incapacitated. So it could be days. Like that could end your adventuring. That could end the adventure, right? So Rorik goes down. He goes to -8 hit points. He almost dies. And we manage to stabilize him. But then if we don't have enough healing in the party between physician, medical, potions, and herbalism, which that's a fair bit of healing, he might not be able to get back up, and he might not be able to get up for days. And so that might end the adventure. For Rorik at the very least. And so that's an interesting question. Sort of how much of that do you want? And the answer is I am just not sure. I'm just not sure. I would love to think that that Runebearer is fairly brutal, and I feel that it can be for sure. But I don't know that I want to necessarily disrupt the party vibe. Like, I like Martin and Rorik. I don't care as much about Tiny or Ren as of yet because they haven't been with us for that long. But I like Martin and Rorik and would like them to sort of continue. They are sort of the main characters, and Martin is even almost more of the main character in some ways. So that's something to think about. And I just don't know how to play it out. I do think I'm okay tweaking the creatures and just going, yeah, I think 5 of these, that's going to be overtuned. For a party of this level. And obviously I could have tweaked the numbers in terms of, instead of 5 of them, made 3 of them, like that kind of thing. And maybe that's a better way to do it instead of tweaking sort of the initial character of the creature. And keep in mind that all the creatures right now are in theory supposed to be for lowish level characters. Once characters start getting skills in the mid to high teens, you know, in theory, you need tougher things to face them or more of those things to face them. So, I mean, tell me what you think. It was a little bit of a... I played this last night, and it was fun. It was fun to play the combats, but I played it a couple times. Did not have good success with these guys, with the stat blocks that I originally gave them. In fact, even one time, when I was trying to do a tactical retreat, Ren got hit, stunned, immediately stunned and wounded, and then just got gutted. Like it was very brutal. And again, I'm sort of okay with a little bit of that. I really am. But I do want these combats to be dangerous and winnable, or dangerous and manageable. And whereas a game like D&D, although low-level D&D tends to not do this, a game like D&D, the reason so it's funny because a lot of people talk about, well, hit points aren't realistic, blah, blah, blah. And I always say, I like hit points, and I'll tell you why. In games like D&D, attrition-based combat, because they essentially let the players decide when to disengage. Attrition-based combat sucks in terms of its excitement value. If I have 50 hit points and you are knocking 4 of them off an attack, that is a pretty boring mental image. But what it does do is it allows me to, and this is what I believe, sort of how the combat system in D&D works, especially older versions of D&D, like say AD&D, is that they give the party a means to understand when they are losing. In Runebearer, you can go from this is fine to this is losing really fast. Soon as Ren goes down, that combat is probably lost. You should get out of there. And it might be hard to impossible rules as written, because the armors might have engaged their targets, in which case they will get an attack, in which case they might wound someone or knock them prone, etc. And so that's just something we have to reconcile with. And I'm not even sure, this is one where I go, this is one where I just go, yep, I'm laying it on the line because I'm playing this game for you guys in a lot of ways. And so I think it's interesting to see the thought process. I hope it's interesting. And in this case, the thought process was, I don't know that they, without cheesing it, and the other problem is I put them in the room as they were going to go walk to all the things and searched them, and they're not really ready for a fight. And so when these armors come, it's not like they're surprised. They don't lose actions, but they're stuck in the room at a point where these guys can sort of get to them and quickly surround them and make retreat difficult. So that's where I'm at. I did run the combat at night last night offline a couple times. It did not go well. I'm considering tweaking the monsters down a tiny bit, and keeping their 5 of them intact, simply because, sure. Plus, I do want creatures appropriate at all, but as I make the rules, I do want creatures appropriate to all different types of characters and levels of characters. And so, you know, sort of trying to figure out what is appropriate for this number of dudes. And this stage of the party. But what do you think? How much death do you want in a game like this? Are the characters important enough to try to mostly keep alive, but allow for the opportunity of death? Could we lose Ren in a heartbeat, right? In here, let's say we do. Let's say, for instance, that, you know, in trying to fight, Ren gets taken down, and the rest of the party manages to retreat through the stairwell door. I mean, obviously, they may or may not try to retrieve her, but they might deem that impossible, and if they do, she's gone, right? She goes away. But what if that happens to Martin? Then the game takes a turn. It changes, like, you know, momentously. And I think Martin, like, the game does sort of hinge on Martin more than it hinges on Rorik, and certainly Tiny or Ren. So something to think about. You know, give me a note in the comments. This was just, it was sort of interesting to see how everything played out, and that's it. I'm just asking you what you think. Thank you very much, and I will hopefully see you for the next episode.